My husband and I are often walking in our town. It's one of those things you do when you have a dog. You walk a lot. And when you're on these walks, we often notice things. We have a pretty regular route, and when we get used to this route, we notice what we notice over and over again. There's the flashing neon sign in one store that blinks a lot. There's the smell of food being prepared by the restaurants we go by. There's usually a woman reading outside who likes to pet our dog. We get very used to the routine of these walks. And though there is change, as there is always change, we get used to the patterns we see. But sometimes there's something that stands out from the usual. And one day, we found ourselves looking at two folding chairs. This was outside an apartment building, and these folding chairs were leaning against a fence, and there was a bike lock around them, one of those chains that you need a code to unlock. This is curious, we thought. First, it's not incredibly typical to see two folding chairs on a sidewalk, and it seemed even more unusual that the folding chairs would be chained to a fence. Now, taken individually, each thing seems ordinary. Folding chairs, a bike chain, a fence, a sidewalk. But the combination of them is not so ordinary. Even still, as the weeks went by, the folding chairs locked to the fence faded into the background. They became part of what we noticed, but didn't quite notice anymore. Until one day, when we went past and found people sitting on these chairs. Now, you would have thought I didn't know how chairs were used by how surprised I was. But that is hardly the point. The surprise came about from these objects that had blended into the background, now reemerging into the foreground. I had viewed these chairs as mysterious, sometimes something to wonder about. And what I found curious about them, even when I discovered people sitting on them, was a certain boundary these chairs held. They existed somewhere between the public and the private sphere. They were on a sidewalk, leaning against a fence. I could touch them if I wanted. You could even unfold them to sit on them while they were chained up. There was this quality of being publicly accessible. And yet, these folding chairs belonged to someone else. That was not my chain holding them to a fence. I did not know the code to unlock this chain. There was a barrier present that expressed those chairs were not mine and not to be used. And perhaps there was a suggestion, too, that the chairs needed to be chained up to the fence out of fear that they would be taken. The sense of ownership was alive with these chairs. And it was not a collective ownership, but something more private. The public and the private are curious points on a spectrum. And sometimes it is a simple thing like folding chairs outside, but sometimes our understanding of the public and the private perhaps seems a bit more consequential. And there are a few examples I want to offer you this morning about this dynamic. First, I want to bring into this conversation, the Reverend Howard Thurman. You heard his words earlier during the reading, and it is in that reading in which he states that there is a world within where for us the great issues of our lives are determined. And he declares this inner world as private. Much of his writing, his sermons, his talks are about a person's inner world. Thurman remains adamant that the inner world needs to be the focus. His emphasis on this inner world is so great that you would be forgiven to think that is all he cares about. You would be forgiven to think that he wants you to turn inward and shut the door behind you, to remain in the confines of your private inner world. He uses the phrase, the inward journey, to conceptualize the work each person must do in understanding the meaning and the shape of that inner world. For Thurman, this inward journey is about having each person come to understand the central, core truths they hold. But countering this inward journey is the language about the traffic of life. Thurman encourages people to come inside, to get out of the traffic. He wants people to be with the quiet so that they might have some creative encounter. That's what he calls a religious experience. This creative encounter could be anything, but for Thurman, it comes from having a strong inner world that is able to connect with the divine, a personal God, if you will. And there's this theological understanding that Thurman offers in which this inner world, that inward journey, is about uniquely accessing the divine within. And now, if we stopped our understanding there, what I suspect you hear is an encouragement to turn inward, to go on that inward journey, to focus on what ultimate truths you hold within. But that's not the only message. That's not the only message today. That's not Thurman's only message. And that was never Thurman's only message. What Thurman emphasizes is the inward journey. He points to something definitive within each of us. But the project is to access what is within so that we might live together publicly. This is so vital to understanding the theology here, in this space. We are encouraged to explore what truth we have within us. We are encouraged to be with ourselves so that we can know ourselves. And we are encouraged to be together, to be co-participants in this shared life. The inward journey is accompanied by the outward journey. There is a public and private nature to our theology of interdependence. There is a public and private nature to us being a faith tradition that asserts the use of reason and a universal perspective. We are asked to know compassion as it lives within us so that we might live compassionately together. The second thing I want to bring forward is I want to hearken back to just yesterday. Many of you, I know, joined in the No Kings protest. And whether we bumped into each other on Boston Common or you were holding signs at a protest in another place, we engaged in a collective action. And we did this outdoors, we did this together, we did this with people we know and we don't know. There was so much collective effervescence in our time yesterday, so much energy that bubbles up when people come together. And we are seekers of justice in a world that promises us that justice is a long ways away. We yearn for that future so that day might be that much closer than it was yesterday. Yesterday, when we found ourselves together in protest. We don't arrive at a protest with the expectation that the problems of this society will be suddenly solved. But we do arrive at a protest with the expectation that power will hear the voices of the people declare that there are problems with this society, that there are problems with the inhumane treatment of people, including the inhumane treatment of our immigrant neighbors and our trans siblings. There are problems with government workers going without pay. There are problems with the society we live in. And one protest will not solve these problems. No protest will solve all problems. But a protest reminds us that we can come together to find solutions. We bring our compassion with us when we do protest. We have compassion for people hurt by the injustices of society. We have compassion that systems benefit some and not everyone. And we recognize that we might benefit more than others simply because of who we are. We show up with compassion to a protest because I think we recognize a truth that exists within us. Perhaps we understand that truth slightly differently from person to person, but it is a truth so recognizable to the next person. When we look within our inner world, we might find a core truth we hold is what helps us to be in community is to be with one another. And that's interdependence as theology at work. The strength you had to harness your inner world, that inward journey you took to recognize that taking a collective action is worth your time, the inner call to be part of the collective that seeks justice and equity. Well, my friends, you've taken what is private and you've made that public. Perhaps not fully, let's not say that. And I think Thurman would appreciate this point. You always have something of your inner self that is so at the core that you'll find it indescribable or even unretrievable, just beyond what you can reach. And yet, you know what's at your core. You know how you live in this world because of the truth within you. And importantly, you live within this world. The last example I want to bring to your focus is faith exploration here at First Parish. And while I've only been your director of faith exploration for a couple of months, I think I might speak with some authority on the matter. And that is, there's a matter of the public and the private when it comes to educating ourselves and each other. The shared process of learning happens because it is shared. There is a necessity for things to be public so that we can absorb information into our private inner worlds, which in turn are invited back into a collective public space so that learning can continue to be shared. We let what we learn in so that it might interact with what we hold already. This acknowledges that there is not one person or one entity that holds all knowledge or all truth. In this shared existence, we can recognize how each of us offers something into a shared learning. When I am leading our faith exploration classes on Sunday, we are often framing our conversations around a question. Like last week, I asked our youngest about compassion. I invited our youngest to share what they knew about this word, compassion. I pointed them at our covenant that we built together earlier this year to suggest that they might find something of compassion in that. And you know what? They had definitions. They had comments. They had ideas. They had thoughts. Our youngest are our co-teachers. And perhaps it does not go recognized by our youngest yet, but the way our faith exploration program is shaped here and is common throughout Unitarian Universalism is that each person has knowledge. Each person shows up with certain understandings. We co-create a space between us that is fed by our knowledge, our understandings. And we take from that shared space to inform us. And our learning continues. Our exploration of faith continues. This is a process I hope you engage the youngest in your families and in your communities with as well. I hope you seek to hear what our youngest knows, because I can assure you that it will connect with what you know. I can assure you that both you and our children are shaped by connecting. The process of compassionate curiosity requires a collective to build something together. And I want you to know how important you are in making what happens in faith exploration stick and take hold. There is something within you that shapes a question to learn with a child. And there is something within a child that shapes a question to learn from a grown-up. There is something within each of us that shapes who we are and how we learn together. Learning together, exploring together, it's the together part. That's what it's about. And when we lock up our folding chairs, when we put a boundary around a seat, we exclude. And if we only pay attention to what is within, we are not living. So go on that inward journey, yes, and be alive on this shared journey of life, this outward journey. And I want to close by drawing your attention to a set of chairs perhaps not too far from us right now. And perhaps these came to your mind earlier. We have a set of chairs outside on our ground beyond these doors, those rainbow Adirondack chairs. Just out there for people to sit on. They can be moved around. Perhaps they won't always all be there, but they are an example of how we've come to understand ourselves in a way that lets us live publicly. We can offer comfort in this world. We can do that public work of living together because we do the private work of knowing what we hold dear, what we hold within, so that we can hold it together. May it be so, and amen.